Please enjoy the story Betrayal. Chapter 1. Xavier Anderson. Hey babe. Hi, she chirped. How was lunch with your father? All right. What time will you be here? 7:30, 8. Good, because I'm making dinner and I'll be serving your favorite dessert. Me. Definitely my favorite dessert, I chuckled, removing a cigarette from the pack on the table. I'm excited for tonight. A specific part of me, I teased as I leaned my head to the side to support the phone between my ear and shoulder. I lit the cigarette, taking a deep breath. How many now? She bugged. Amanda tried to make me quit smoking and she was doing a great job. Ever since we started dating, I only smoked the maximum of 3 cigarettes a day. Second, I answered immediately, not wanting to disappoint her. I inhaled slowly, my system responding to the smoke. Damn it, she cursed through the line and I heard a faint shatter. What happened? I broke the salad bowl. I'll talk to you later, after I finish cleaning this mess. I love you. I love you too. Don't be late, she quickly added. I won't. I promise, I assured her before closing the line. Dropping the phone on the table in my room, I walked towards the bedside table and opened the drawer. I sighed, getting out the black metal case my father got me when I turned 18, and 5 years later I never used it. I just kept it in this drawer with a decision I have never made. Closing my eyes, I sat on the bed, the cigarette still between my lips, my hands brushing over the case. After talking 2 more puffs, I pulled the ashtray and extinguished the cigarette, squashing it against the glass until it was put out completely. You see, not all of us live ordinary lives. I have always thought we were a normal family, with my father always cursing and having so much men and guards around for the sake of it, but I was so wrong. Everything I had in mind was wrong, and I found out in the worst way. I found out when a bunch of armed men barged into the house and took my mother away while I watched it, although from the keyhole of the storage room. A 12-year-old kid who did exactly what his mother had asked him and regretted for the rest of his life. The memory still played in my head 5 years later, raw and flowing like the river. I opened up the box, revealing a customized gun which was so dear to my father. The gun was gold-plated with a short muzzle. It was Russian, of course. My dad had always bought his weapons from his Russian mafia friends. Slowly and steadily I lifted the gun from the case. The metal was cold in my hand, icy, poisonous and foreign. It was light and compact. The black body and golden barrel, along with its intrinsic details, gave the impression that it had been crafted with care, handmade to be precise. He had given it to me as a request to join them. If it weren't for the mafia, my father and I wouldn't have lost my mother. Amanda's smile appeared in my head and I smiled as I brushed my hand over the writings on the gun. She was the love of my life. I had met her a year ago and I've never been happier with someone. I dreaded the thought of ever losing her forever or putting her in danger. I packed the gun back into the case and went to my father's office with a firm decision in my head. Are you threatening me, Jeff? I heard my father snarl as I was about to knock on the door. I suddenly retreated from doing so. Holding the case to my chest and standing in a way so that I could be able to eavesdrop and not be caught, I listened to the rest of his conversation. Leave my son out of this. This is between me and you. Bloody hell. Without our men, just both of us. You have my word. I'll meet you in an hour. These were the last words I heard my father say before I rushed to my room and opened up the case to get out my gun. I chose to do nothing a few years ago and I lost my mother, but this time I have to do something. I couldn't lose my father. I then headed to the garage and ignited my bike, ready to follow him. It was almost an hour since we left and I'd been carefully driving behind him in a way not to get caught, wondering why he didn't take any of his men. The road and the atmosphere seemed unfamiliar and I felt uncertainty down in my stomach. We were on an endless straight road, which made the ride feel dull, but I prepared myself as I noticed him take a turn onto an abandoned street which looked recently tarred from the monochrome patchwork. It seemed like a straight street with no turns ahead, so I decided to slow down the bike, keeping an eye on my father's car. Waiting a few minutes next to an unpainted concrete wall by the side of the road, I loaded the gun and prepared it. I then hopped off the bike and started scanning the area. I looked up at the sky as I walked around. A fiery red orb of light slowly sank beneath the horizon, and threads of light lingered in the sky, mingling with the rolling clouds, dyeing the sky an orange-red shade. I inspected the area, scrutinizing the crumbling walls that were nothing more than a ghostly silhouette of some previous existence. Wondering why would my father meet up with someone here, I walked in the direction I saw my father drive to. The wind whistled through the very little available trees. My nostrils flared at the dust particles invading my nose, making me sneeze. I cursed under my breath while I rubbed my nose in hopes of not having to go through another sneeze. As I got closer, a warehouse came into sight. I stepped away from the tarred road onto a sandy path which would lead me directly to the warehouse. There were two cars parked in front of it, one which I clearly recognized as my father's and the other was unfamiliar, but that didn't bother me. What bothered me was the feeling of fear gnawing at me. As I walked towards the warehouse, I tried as much as possible not to make any unwanted sounds. I then sneaked next to the metal door of the warehouse. Fortunately, the door was half open and their blustering was evident. Chapter 2. Xavier Anderson. Jeff, don't you know my men are stronger than yours? They always were, my father started. I could only hear voices. I didn't dare take a peek. You should know better than interfering with my goods, the other voice said, but you always have to put in a hand, always the superior aid. You always cheat and I hate cheaters, so I took things into my own matter. You're right, I always cheat and here I am. I heard the loading of a gun and I held my breath as I brought my hand to my chest, hoping my heartbeats weren't too audible. Jeff, my father warned, and I could sense fear hidden in his voice. I gulped uneasily, knowing what would happen next. The feeling of fear gnawed at me until it rested in the pits of my stomach, tearing me apart from the inside. That's why I'm going to win today, and you're going to lose. It happened all too quick. I heard a loud gunshot and before I could register anything I found myself in there, my finger tight around the trigger. All I could focus on was the blood gushing out of his head just the way the water balloon bursts, staining his clothes and the floor. But I couldn't forget the cold look on his face. It gave me shudders. I watched as his grip on the gun loosened and how the gun fell to the floor. The sound of metal hitting the ground was faint. All I could think about was the man I had just shot. No sane thought played in my mind, nothing but a weird feeling crippling down my stomach. I captured every small detail, from the blood dripping on the floor, to him landing on the ground with a thud, as if time had stopped. A groan pulled me from my numb state and I looked in the direction of the sound. With a loud gasp, I rushed towards my father, who lay there on the floor, his heart on his chest with blood oozing between his fingers, staining his clothes. "Dad," I whispered as I knelt down beside him. I pressed my palms against his flesh to stop the bleeding. But it was too late. There was so much blood, dark crimson, with a discreet, metallic scent. "Zavi," he whispered, before closing his eyes. His breathing then slowed down before stopping forever. "No, no, no," I kept chanting, shaking him. But that only gave me chills because the scene in front of me was dreadful. I had watched killing scenes, but never have I imagined myself to witness one live in front of me, and with someone who meant so much to me, the only person I had. It felt so unreal, like the dream and I was about to wake up, or so I hoped. I closed my eyes, getting away from my father's dead body. As I backed away, I tripped on the guy I had killed. I had killed the person I shot him in his head with my bare hands. I am a murderer, a killer. I was in a room with 2 dead bodies, one of my father's and one of the man I had killed. They both lay on the ground, surrounded by a pool of blood. The scene stunned the living daylights out of me. I screamed so loud that my lungs started to ache and I felt like puking. I growled loud, dropping my head in my hands, trying to ease the throbbing in my head. I sat there, helpless, not knowing what to do and too scared to even think. I cried until my eyes ran dry and my chest heaved violently. Hastily picking up the phone, I dialed a number, my fingers trembling with fear. The number I thought I'd never have to dial anymore. My dad's most trusted man in the mafia. "Xavier, tell me," he said, sounding concerned. My dear father? He is," I babbled incoherent words. I couldn't even understand what I was saying. "I'll be right there, don't go anywhere," he ordered before closing the line. I dropped the phone next to me and closed my eyes, taking in a long deep breath to calm myself. All that came to my mind was her glowing face. The delicate outlines of Amanda's features burned behind my eyelids. How could I stay with her now? How could I look into her eyes and not feel guilty? She deserved someone better, someone without a tainted past, nightmares, someone who had clean hands. And that someone definitely wasn't me. A tear coursed down once I decided what should be done. I choked on my saliva, something welling up in my chest. Every few minutes, the pain renewed itself with a higher intensity. Chapter 3. Xavier Anderson. Then. Now I knew that I couldn't just leave her and walk away from her. I knew that she won't give up without any sort of explanation, and I couldn't give her one. So the best option I had was hurt her enough to leave me. And that was what I had planned to do. I had headed to the club and drank a whole lot of alcohol, intoxicating my body enough to have the courage to do what I had in mind. Even in my drunken state, I had girls coming up to me, starting conversations and sliding their phone numbers into my pocket before leaving. I sheepishly smiled and winked at the 2 tall, blonde girls who were coming up to me with a smirk playing on their lips. These were the golden ticket to my plan. And that's how I ended up at our apartment's door, with the keys between my fingers, having girls I never thought I'd have so close, wrapped around me. I never expected I would do such a thing to Amanda. But here I was, drunk with a shattered, bent and twisted heart. Using all my will to do what I was about to do, I disposed the sane mind I had left. Taking a deep breath and putting up a facade, I unlocked the door, hearing their laughter echoing in my ears. I wanted to give this up, but I had to remind myself that Amanda deserved better. Pulling down the doorknob, I pulled them closer to me, knowing full well that Amanda would be in the living room waiting for me, worried. "Oh, thank God. I've been so worried. I called you a million times," I heard her say, and heard her footsteps approaching. "XA." She abruptly paused as she gasped loud when she saw that I wasn't alone. Now I felt nothing when her smile faded off her face as she saw me. It could have been from all the drinking or because I finally accepted my fate. I have done something much worse than what I was about to do. Being a gangster had always been in my blood and I never accepted it. "Hello, Amanda," I coldly said, smirking at her while the girls giggled and ran their hands through my hair. "Leave it for them to make one hell of a show." What is this?" she asked in a low voice, the hurt evident on her face and in her voice. "What do you see?" She stared at me in disbelief, her eyes clouding with tears as she took deep breaths. She started, but I cut her off. "I want a threesome. I got bored of just you," I spat, smiling. "I could do it the foursome for your sake," I added, blowing her a kiss. Taken back, her eyes widened, reflecting everything as she gasped loud. "What? Are you crazy? I'm very much sane. Get out!" she screamed, uncontrollably slapping my chest like a mad woman. The girls to my side just stared at her, not moving or saying a word. "This is my house," I simply said, knowing that this would do it. She stopped and backed away from me, flabbergasted. My eyes drifted to hers and I wish I didn't look into them. First, there was a flash of confusion in her eyes, then a hint of realization before the disappointment dawned, and finally, they became clouded with hurt before they got teary. She slowly closed her eyes as she took a deep breath. When she opened them, they had a deafness, a stillness. "Perhaps if I hadn't followed my father, I wouldn't have lost her too." She harshly poked her finger in my chest and whispered slowly, "This. I'd never ever imagined you'd hurt me this much." Then tears slowly coursed down her cheeks in an unrestricted manner. "You broke me into a million pieces," she shakily said, her lower lip trembling as she spoke. That was when all the emotions I had suppressed flooded my soul. "I broke the only person who could take away my pain." She then stormed right past me and loudly slammed the door behind her, leaving me with the girls, who were now shocked, and all her belongings behind. But she did take one specific piece of me with her: my heart. And that was when I hurt the one woman I vowed never to. I slowly closed my eyes, taking a deep breath as I did so. "We should go," one of them said, and the other agreed with her. Before I could even say a word, they backed away and left. The pain came in waves, engulfing me, strangling me. My legs buckled up and I fell to my knees. I sat there on the ground, my hand to my chest while the pain continued to abuse me. Tears began to spill from my helpless eyes. It felt like emptiness, a sheer of nothingness. I felt so raw, like there was no shell over my pain. I had never felt so alone, so incapable of doing even the smallest tasks. And this was only the beginning of the pain. This was how I ruined my life with one simple mistake. This was how fate took away everyone around me and played me. Betrayal. Final degrees. 6 months later. Xavier Anderson. Waking up to the alarm ringing, I headed into the shower to take a bath. Memories flashed while the hot water splashed on my skin, and I vigorously shook my head so hard to erase them. Memories that brought remorse, heartbreak and pain. A Christmas without my father and without her. I couldn't even say her name without feeling like the pieces missing from me. After showering and dressing, I put my luggage in the car, start the engine, and head to the airport. I had a flight to Georgia. My uncle had prepared a Christmas dinner to gather all the relatives in one house, so that we would celebrate Christmas together just like every year. It's a traditional feast. Unlike last year, I was going alone this time. Feeling exhausted and jet-lagged after being in the plane for about 8 hours, I pulled myself up and called the agency. I told them I had landed, so they would hand me the rented car along with its key. Then I dialed my uncle's number to inform him I had landed safely, as he had so constantly pestered me to. Depending on the traffic, I figured I would reach his home in an hour or so. After tipping the airport staff who had helped carry my luggage, I got into the rental car and switched it on. Without prolonging my travels any further, I headed to my destination tucked amongst the snow-capped mountains. A weird noise from the engine sounded about half an hour later. The car started fuming as it rolled to a halt, refusing to move any further. I opened the door with irritation, and just as I got out, the cold breeze made me flinch. The frigid snow bit my skin, making my palms tingle as I opened the hood of the car to check the problem. The hot smoke mixed with the chilling blizzard, accompanied by the fizzling sound from the engine. The blizzard's coolness and whine blew the hot smoke from the car into my face, making me cough in an uncontrolled manner. Great! Couldn't you wait half an hour? I kicked the car in exasperation before I got my bags and all my belongings from the boot. Hoping to find the car or someone who could help me, I stared in the direction of my destination. "Damn it," I groaned. Then I pulled out my phone to search for a hotel, restaurant, or bar I could stay in until this car incident could be fixed. I held the home button of my iPhone. Siri, I muttered. Search nearest repair shop in Google Maps. Hello, Xavier. Nearest is Ryden's Repairs, Siri replied while the map overcame the phone's screen, giving me an estimated 47-minute walk. Nearest hotel, I suggested. Savannah Mansion Hotel. 14-minute walk, Siri declared, pulling up a different map. Knowing I had no other choice, I decided to start walking, hoping to reach my destination before it got dark. After a brisk 15-minute walk, under the night sky and howling wind, I finally reached my location, the hotel. By the time the plain big building came into view, exhaustion pulled at my shoulders and a set of violent shivers worked their way down my spine. Relieved, I headed inside to ask for some help. "Oh sir, are you alright? Should we get you something warm to drink?" the receptionist asked. Without waiting for my response, she hollered for a Garen to bring me some hot tea. "Hello," I greeted. "Are there any mechanics nearby? My car broke down a few miles down the road." "I am truly sorry sir, but I think all the garages are closed for the holidays. Who would leave their work 4 days before Christmas?" "You did idiot," my inner self scolded. "How about a taxi driver?" "I don't think so, but I'll make a call to check," she replied, bringing up the phone to her ear. I waited in anticipation, tapping my fingers on her desk while I supported my head with my left arm. "No one." She shook her head. "I'm sorry." "It's okay. Would you like to book a room until we find someone who could fix your car?" "Sure," I said, reaching for my wallet. "Oh, sir, there's no room left, but I'll have a vacant room in a few hours." "Okay, I'll wait in the lobby." The comfortable, brown couch swallowed me up when I sat down and unraveled my scarf. I drank the hot tea in an attempt to warm my body. Just as I was about to doze off, the receptionist notified me the room was ready. "Oh, already? That's nice." I gladly rose from the couch to return to her desk. The keys were handed over after the payments were settled. Then I called my uncle to explain the situation. "Uncle Ricardo," my car fumed up, "but don't worry, I food." "So son, did you find anyone to repair it?" he interrupted, concerned. "Unfortunately, no, but I found a hotel. I'm going to spend a night or two here until I find someone to fix it. I'll come pick you now." "Don't worry." "No, Uncle, don't," I pleaded. "There's a hailstorm out there. It's dangerous, and I could forgive myself if anything happened to you. Don't worry about it, Xavier. I lost my father. I don't want to lose you. Please." "All right, Xavier." He sounded upset. "Everyone was prepared to see you tonight. Anyway, take care and keep me updated." Muffled cry suddenly pierced the quiet hotel. I stopped walking and looked around, no longer able to concentrate on the phone conversation. Curiosity, as always, got the best of me. "I have to go. I'll call you later. Take care." After hanging up, I started walking again while following the cries to a bedroom. The door was halfway open, so I peeked in to find the young lady sobbing, her back facing me. Her blonde hair brought back memories of a girl who haunted my dreams and memories. "It can't be," I thought to myself. As I began to leave, she turned around, revealing herself. Something within me snapped, and I froze. Her unexpected presence had me taken aback. After an awkward pause, my expression melted and I felt lighter. "Amanda." There she stood, Amanda Jenner, the woman whose heart I broke, the woman whom my happiness depended on, and the only woman I've ever wanted and loved. "Xavier ... I need you," she pleaded, her voice cracking. That was all I needed to revive my emotions. I had not been touched like that in months. A teardrop made its way down her cheek. I then abruptly dropped the bags and ran up to her. She was the only one who could make me feel long-forgotten sensations. I loved her with all I had. While I hugged her tight, all the memories and emotions I had tried to suppress resurfaced. "It's all right," I whispered, placing the kiss on her forehead and wiping away her tears. Her thick, blonde hair was poker straight and pulled back into a low ponytail with a few strands brushing her flawless skin. I looked at her young, ocean blue eyes and found myself lost with all the memories we had built. My gaze traveled away from her face, studying the rest of what she had become. As I ran my fingers over her skin, my eyes widened in terror at her bruised and scarred arms. "Why?" I managed to say. Seeing her like this made my heart wince in pain. Never had I seen her hurt, neither physically nor emotionally. I hungered so badly to injure whoever had done this to her. She shook her head and sat on the bed. "It doesn't matter." Sitting beside her, my brows furrowed while I gently touched her scars. "Is it?" I couldn't continue. "Was it because of me?" I dreaded the thought. "After that night, I couldn't bear the pain," she murmured, not looking at me. I had never hated myself more than I did right now. I had wounded the only woman I had vowed to never hurt and to always protect in so many ways. Images flashed through my head with a rush of adrenaline. I squeezed my fist. I should have fought for her and gone after her the day she left, but I wasn't myself. That was the day I lost everything: my soul, my heart, and the love of my life. The day I decided I didn't deserve someone like her, the day I became a monster. Had I known it would have had such an effect on her, I wouldn't have shut her out that way. I had given her a reason to leave me, because I was no good for her. I let her go, without fighting for her. She then laid her head on my chest, listening to my heartbeat as I stroked her face. "Stay with me. I'm scared of my nightmares," she whispered, breaking the silence. Nodding, I lifted her hand to plant gentle kisses on her knuckles. While she slept soundlessly next to me on the bed, I played with her hair and watched her as she slept. My surprise prevented me from sleeping myself. I couldn't believe she was here, in my arms. Amanda was still the only one who could pacify me and bring a smile to my face. After losing her for 6 months and believing I had lost her for good, it felt unreal to caress her flawless face and wrap my hands around her. We spent the whole of the next day in the room catching up. We had lunch in the room and watched television while we cuddled up. I asked her if she wanted to come with me to the mountains to celebrate Christmas Eve like last year. She complied. My uncle and his wife were really happy to hear such great news. They had always loved and approved of her. Though we had broken up 6 months ago, I still loved her. It had taken me 6 months to realize that I hadn't moved on. Amanda was hard to forget when she had given me so much to remember. Eventually, I left the room to check with the receptionist for any news. She had found a repair shop, which, fortunately, was open today. She also informed me that the car would be ready tomorrow morning. Then I returned to the room. After opening the door, my eyes widened before I smiled and shook my head. This woman had me wrapped up around her finger. She sat on the bed, clothed in sexy, red lingerie and a short, sheer robe. When I reached her, she wrapped her hands around my neck and kissed my lips. As her kisses trailed down my neck, I pulled her closer, feeling her body against mine. My fingers traced down the valley of her breasts, pinning her with my other hand, tracing soft and invoking circles at her right hips. My tongue swirled in and out of her mouth. Squeezing her closer, she melted into my embrace. "I want you." That was all it took, those 3 words slipping out of her lips. Without uttering a word, I lifted her up and walked towards the bed. After our love-making, she leaned on my bare chest, drawing circles on my skin while I played with her hair. "Xavier," HHHM. Looking up at me, she asked, "What is the one thing you regret?" Bringing back memories of that dreadful night. My first thought was of when I let her go. My second was the reason I did it in the first place. That was the worst thing I had ever done, my biggest regret. I couldn't. I wanted to tell her, to get this burden off my chest, but I was scared if I told her, she'd fear me. She'd finally see me as a monster and would turn her back on me. Memories of my feelings and seeing the blood-stained ground in the dark filled my head. I shook my head to clear the memory. "You wouldn't want to hear this story, baby. You can't tell me. I would never judge you. I would never leave or fear you after this. Promise." "I promise," she assured me as she kissed my neck, resting her head against my chest again. "The night before you left, I did something extremely unforgivable." "What did you do?" she asked. I inhaled deeply. My father was part of a mafia gang. One day, I heard my father on the phone. It seemed as if someone was threatening him. I could hear my father shouting, saying, "I'll come. Just leave my family out of it." I took my gun and followed my father to an abandoned warehouse. I came down from the car and heard them shouting as the man then held the gun to my father's heart. I then entered the room and, blinded by rage, shot the guy in the head. I glanced down at her to read her facial expression. She seemed calm but tense. "I don't know who it was, but he killed my father. Then I killed him. Unintentionally." She didn't appear surprised, as if she had known all along and was just making sure. A bad feeling in the pit of my stomach sprouted, suggesting that something was wrong, but I ignored it. I mean, I had the woman of my dreams in bed with me and things were going back to normal, the way they had been before that incident. What more could I need? Nothing else mattered to me, but her. Looking up at me, Amanda squeezed my hand. There was something in her eyes, something I couldn't decipher. Then she stood up and walked to the restroom. I was exhausted, so I closed my eyes and fell asleep, not waiting for her to return. The next morning, a loud bang on the door startled me awake, and I immediately reached for the gun in the drawer on my left while using my free hand to hide Amanda. Neither the gun nor Amanda was there. Guards in black suits aimed their guns at my head while gathering around me. Dragging me out of bed, they threw my clothes at me and watched me change. What a moment of shame! They then dragged me against the floor, locking handcuffs on my wrists. I was so confused. They had surely mistaken me for another person. Or so I thought until they called my real name, Xavier Anderson. The incident from 6 months ago came to mind, and I finally realized what this was all about. I remembered how my father's partners and guards had erased every trace. They had made certain I wouldn't be caught. This time there was no way out, though. I had been caught. It was time to pay the price. I was just glad I had spent the night with Amanda before forever being trapped. I guessed every villain paid the price. No matter how safe we thought we were, we would always get caught. Even if our kills were unintentional or against our will, we still took a life. "Where is she? What did you do to her?" I demanded while struggling against their grip, hoping they hadn't hurt her to make her speak. "Nothing," a familiar voice said. She walked in like the world had been made just for her. Looking as breathtaking as ever, she clutched my gun between her fingers. Waiting for someone to provide an explanation, I gave her a puzzled look. She stepped in front of me and smirked, pulling her jacket off her shoulders to expose her arm. Where bruises and marks had ravaged her skin yesterday, healthy, unmarked skin was today. I couldn't have been more confused if I had woken up in a foreign country. Amanda walking in untouched, without any bruising, made no sense. As she stared at me, eyes searching mine, giving nothing away. But as she drew close, I could see her eyes clouded by tears, and that confused me. Her long, Sharp nail crossed my lips while she smiled. When she brought her finger down, not even the burning sensation could cover the confusion whirling inside me. Then she kissed me harshly, her hand squeezing my neck tightly as she did so. It felt like this would be the last time I would have a taste of her. In that moment I didn't know who she was and I wondered if she knew herself. "He was my father," she whispered before she bit my earlobe. A satisfied smirk was on her face again while she pulled away. "He was a monster, a murderer. And so are you," she bawled, a tear coursing down her cheek. And that statement hit home so hard. "Did you really think it was all a coincidence?" she asked as she cut my face, looking at me with a glint of mockery. The lightning bolt hit me. The HE car. My thoughts scattered, leaving my mind bare. The HE hotel. My ego shattered. HER tears. My heart broke as I felt my soul been ripped off. How did I not know this? How could I have been so naive and blinded? Turning away from me, she threw the gun to the side. "I would never kill," she hollered, walking away like the supermodel. I stared after her in awe. While I watched her leave, the realization hit me, burning a hole in my chest. This had all been planned. She had spent 6 months plotting her revenge. It was fake, from the dysfunction car to our hotel encounter. Every promise she had made lay empty in her wake. She always did say promises were made to be broken. Nothing hurts more than being hurt by the single person you thought would never hurt you. Maybe this was the same way she felt that night. How I didn't deserve such immense emotional pain but at the same time did. In spite of everything, only one thought ran continuously through my mind. How could she fake her love for me? Didn't I mean anything to her anymore? That's the saddest thing about betrayal, it always comes from the person you'd least expect. Extended version 01 Amanda. I smiled at how Amelia tried to pull Xavier to the candy shop, working on her cute face to convince him to buy her a candy. Xavier looked at me, making a face. I laughed at him and raised my hands in surrender, waiting for them to come back. "Mommy, look what Daddy got me," Amelia said, pointing a large lollipop towards me as she held onto Xavier's hand. "Wow," I chirped, giggling as she tried to make it fit in her mouth. "We should head home," I suggested to Xavier before leaning down to Amelia's level. "It's time to go home, baby girl." "But Mommy, I'm not ready," she whined. "You tried almost all the rides, you have to be tired," Xavier said, trying to convince her. "One more, please, please, please," she begged, pulling down both of our hands, pouting her lips. "Fine. One more," I gave in, and before I could finish my sentence she ran off. "She's as stubborn as you are," Xavier said, smiling wide. I noticed the couple behind Alex giving me a disapproving look. I raised my brow, glancing at Xavier to see if he had noticed it too. Shrugging it off, he pulled me closer and kissed me. "How could you marry him?" I heard. I pulled away. "Excuse me." "The killer. He killed your father. A murderer." I looked at Xavier and found blood on his hands. Oh my God. With horror, I looked at his hands and followed the blood dripping onto the floor to find a pool of blood under our legs. "No!" I gasped, pulling the covers away, breathing heavily. I scanned the room before putting my hand to my chest and closing my eyes, taking deep breaths to calm myself. "It was just a dream," I whispered repeatedly, reassuring myself. Once calm, I went to the toilet to brush my teeth and shower. As I stepped into the shower, my toes flinched as they touched the chilled floor. My mind was in shreds. This was the day everything changes. The day where I'll be faced with the hardest decision. I was not ready and will never be ready for what I was about to do. Closing my eyes to the water, the hot water soaked into my hair. Memories filled my head, making the decision even harder. My mind swirled with emotions and a feeling of nervousness settled at the pit of my stomach. I leaned against the cool tiles as my weak legs threatened to buckle. Not only was water from the shower coursing down my face but so were my tears. I could still remember the hurt and betrayal in his eyes and how confused he was. It still played in my head even after days. Every beautiful moment spent together was turned into a painful memory after that one mistake. After I found out, I sat down at the ceramic ground and I pulled my knees up to my chest, wrapping my arms around my shins. If only I wouldn't have to face real life. I let my head fall down to my knees, and I pulled my legs closer to me, letting the tears fall down. I wish I had never met him and life had never betrayed me. I heard a knock and I straightened up. Was just checking if you had woken up. Yes, I yelled, not caring how my voice sounded. I picked myself up and turned off the faucet to face reality. As I stepped out of the shower and stared at the mirror, all I could see was a scared and helpless person staring back at me. "You can do this," I whispered to my reflection, wiping off a tear which escaped. As I was wearing my heels, my mom entered the room with a smile on her face. "Are you ready?" she asked. I didn't answer and continued wearing my heels. "Your father's gone because of him," she stated, giving me a disapproving look. "You're the only who can avenge your father." I closed my eyes and sighed, debating whether it was right. "You can't give up right now. We've come too far," she encouraged me, putting her hands on my shoulders. "Don't tell me you're having second thoughts. I love. How could you? He killed your father." "It's too much for me," I yelled with exasperation. "You were doing fine. You got back at him for killing your father." "Yeah," I mumbled, remembering what I did. "And so will you be today." "I believe in you," she declared. "This is for us and your father. Now get ready, let's get going," she said with a stern voice before walking out. I nodded, lost for words. The end.